I want to officially welcome everyone to this founder roundtable discussion on behalf of the fourth floor. And the topic today, as I'm sure all of you know, the why and the how about boards. So we did one to this founder roundtable discussion a while back. It has been extremely popular. It's available in our platform in the resources section. We're really excited to help bring the part 2 of that conversation and to have that today. This will also, it's being recorded, the recording of this roundtable will be in the resources room inside the platform for all the members to benefit from. That one other bit of housekeeping before we hear that I'm picking up a little. My apologies if my internet is not great. Hopefully, can you hear me? Thumbs up.
We can hear you, Bree. Just talk closer to your computer.
Okay, really straight. You know what? I'm hearing a lot of background noise. I'm not sure. Are you hearing a lot of background noise as well?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't.
It felt like a vacuum was on.
Yeah, I don't think it's me. I actually think it's maybe someone who's not muted. Okay, I don't know. Is it gone now?
Gone. It is gone.
Okay, okay. Hopefully the mystery solved. Hopefully everyone can hear me. My apologies for that. So I was just about to mention questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. I know Susan, who's moderating, who I'm about to introduce, I know will be sure to keep an eye on the questions in the chat. And Susan, just so you know, we're also happy to be helpful as well. If there's lots of questions coming in, we'll try and help feed them to you. So people listening, just put a Q first and then a colon, and so that we know it's a question, but don't hold back. I'm sure the panelists are all anxious to know exactly what you want to hear them speak about. So put them in. And then finally, before we dive in, just a very brief word about the fourth floor. So we at the fourth floor, we are a market network designed to diversify boardrooms and cap tables. And we're also on a mission to close the gender, power, wealth, and funding gap by advancing for-profit board careers for women, supporting women-led startups and funds, and also providing women opportunities to invest in other women. So that's what we're all about. If you are not a member of the fourth floor, but you're interested in either advancing your board career, possibly investing in a woman-led startup or a woman-led fund, please consider joining us. And registering for a platform tour is the best way to get started. You can do that on our website. We'll put the link in the chat right now. Also, we have a board bootcamp coming up on December 7th from noon to 2. If you have not gone to a board bootcamp, whether you're already a member of the fourth floor or you're considering joining the fourth floor, we strongly recommend you do that. It's a great overview. It really enables you to understand what we're about, and also is just a practical resource in and of itself. So all those links will be in the chat as well. Non-members, you can use the code FOUNDER for a free ticket. And then lastly, the last thing I want to say is that if you would like to join us as a board candidate or to invest, but you're hesitant to pay the membership fee, we are happy to help you convince your employer to underwrite the cost of that, to nominate you, and so that you can join us and they can pay the bill. So please don't hesitate to reach out and ask us if you want our help. And for now, you unfortunately have to sign up on the wait list. We will be opening up our new platform to people, to non-current members shortly. So if you're on the wait list, you'll be first to know. So we're really excited for that to all open up and for you to see the new platform. So hopefully we'll see some of you at platform tours. Okay, so now enough about me and the fourth floor. Let's get to the point of today. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to your amazing moderator today, Susan Sierota. She is an entrepreneurial and collaborative executive, respected leader who identifies visionary opportunities and champions strategic initiatives that drive the business and culture for both Fortune 500 high growth startups and for both Fortune 500 companies and high growth startups, excuse me, and just an all around incredible human being. Also, hands down, just one of the smartest people I think I've ever met, and just a fantastic moderator. So Susan, why don't you come join me here in the spotlight, and I will let you introduce yourself more fully, and then I'll leave it to you to introduce your fantastic panelists.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Breen. And I just got to say, I am just so excited to be here. Breen, you know, but for the room, talking about how do we get either our advisors or our fiduciary board to serve us and our companies is one of my favorite topics because it is called serving on a board. So really excited to be here to talk about that and to support for the fourth floor because the amount of content that you're putting on to really across the board achieve your purpose, which is something I so believe in. I'm super grateful to the fourth floor. So thank you for having
Well,
me.
thank you. We're super grateful to you as well.
Yeah, so as Brent said, I've done both big companies and I've built and sold a couple companies and I've invested in some companies. I've sat on boards and I've built some boards and I've made every single mistake that there is to make. And some of them, unfortunately, more than once. So right now I spend a great deal of my time really trying to help people who are either really on that founder journey doing the hardest thing anyone can do to see around corners or help other people who are in that ecosystem on boards as well. So that's me, excited to be here. Nancy, why don't you kick us off and tell the group about you?
Sure. My name is Nancy Aholawill. I actually am a female founder, just exited my own company about a year ago, which was in telecom hardware and software. So playing with lots of male engineers before. Also was an investment scout, still currently am with corporate venture capital, and also family offices and private equity, and have sat on the board myself and have done strategic consulting for the great period of my career as well, and having come back to New York after being overseas for 13 years and have worked internationally and work with Fortune 500 clients as well as small to medium-sized startups and growth companies as well. So nice to see everyone and happy to answer any questions about boards as well.
Awesome, Nancy, thank you so much. Nicole, over to you.
All right, thanks, Susan. Great to be here. I am Nicole Homer. I am a co-founder and CEO of HX Innovations. We are a movement analytics company. Right now, we provide movement analytics to teams and leagues to help them assess athlete performance and also assess and warn against foot and ankle injuries and knee injuries as well. As a matter of background, a former, I guess, once a Marine, always a Marine. I'm a Marine War veteran. In the Marine Corps, I handled the logistics for over 18,000 Marines and helped strategize the longest really bulk fuel line that was ever laid down in history. So that was like a really big deal. Outside of that, I also did contracts and litigations for employment and compliance for corporate sectors. And in that, I was able to spearhead different initiatives to help the merger and acquisition process across different petrochemical and water treatment companies. And so right now I'm a startup founder. We are building a board. We right now have a board of advisors. So I'm happy to be here and happy to answer any questions from the perspective of a new startup adventure.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm excited to hear more. And Cynthia, you're up.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. Thank you to the fourth floor for this wonderful opportunity to discuss this exciting topics boards. I'm Cynthia Nwaubani. I'm the CEO and founder of PharmD Live. PharmD Live is a virtual clinical pharmacist solution, and we're all about supporting chronic disease management and also preventing adverse drug events in senior patients. We partner with healthcare organizations, doctors' offices, and health systems to deliver our solutions virtually to their patients. My background is in pharmacy. I'm a geriatric pharmacist, and I'm very passionate about innovative approaches to help make medication safer and also to prevent fatal medication outcomes in our senior population. I currently sit on my company's board of directors, and I'm also on an advisory board for another startup company. So I'm looking forward to our discussion today. Thank you all.
Amazing. I love the diverse background on this panel. All I know is we are going to have very, very different opinions and probably disagree. Is the best panels because the only thing I know is everyone's always right. It's all situational. So to be able to provide multiple perspectives to this group is super exciting to me. So with that, before we jump into the perspectives, Nancy, would love if you could just give an overview of the difference between advisors and a board of directors and how you think about those.
Sure. So an advisory board are the people that actually support the founders and the management team of a company. So basically the people that are driving what's going to happen with the company, essentially, from the perspective of supporting the management team. So if you're a CEO, CFO, CMO, these are the people that are behind you, that are supporting you and telling you what's going on. Like, we think that you're not doing something right, but they don't have any say per se, except for changing your opinion. A governing board is something completely different. This is made up of usually investors or people that have a decision-making power that can actually replace a management team. They can replace a CEO, CFO, CMO, if they think that they're not the right fit for a company, or potentially if they're at a situation where companies pivoting out of a growth mode, startup mode, and maybe into sometimes an IPO situation. So similar, but very different perspectives, because a governing board has a lot more power and control over a company, whereas an advisory board is there to really go, hey, you know what, guys, I can help you out, support you emotionally, sometimes even financially as well, because they can be basically seed funding you into your company. But at the same time, too, what ends up happening is that they really don't have much control over a situation. So that's the difference between the two.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nancy. Want to just repeat one thing that you said, which is when you are looking at your fiduciary board, it's really important to upfront define what control provisions you put in place. Because at different, depending on the stage of your board, you can set it up where you do not give away control quite yet. And there's lots of ways to do that, but it's something that you should think of from the beginning. And then I also heard you say that the advisors, Nancy, are lot more to serve on specific projects or functions or connections versus having that overall fiduciary responsibility.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
I love that. On that note, since let's jump in and start talking advisors. Nicole, how do you go about finding like the best advisors for you?
The best advisors. So the process that I tend to go through is I have it written down as a strategy, of course. And so I like to get to know the person, right? Establish a relationship. That usually takes months, right? It usually takes some time to do. I first have to think about what does the company need, right? And then as I'm cultivating relationships with different people and I understand their skill sets and I understand how they function and I understand their mind and what they can offer. And then in time, I'll say, you know, I have a possible like a position that's open and I really want you to consider coming on board and coming alongside the company. And so I actually went through the fourth floor. I'm a member of the fourth floor and I went to the fourth floor knowing that I could find women who were top niche caliber and you could like vet them actually. And so they have process where you can interview potential board members. And that's how I actually found one of the board members that we have today. And it was just a beautiful event where we just clicked, and then we continued the conversation. I asked her questions, she asked me questions, and we said, well, let's just, kind of date each other for a couple months and see what happens. And then from there, that relationship evolved into something else, into other relationships. And I met, I want to say, two of my other board members through similar situations, just being in different events. We were at a Reinventing Delaware dinner hosted by Pierre DuPont Foundation, and we're around like all the people in the room had the best ideas in Delaware, and we're spitting out these different ideas. And this guy who's sitting next to me, he's like, "That's a really interesting thought. I really like that. Tell me what you do." And so I started talking with him. Well, come to find out, he's like this phenomenal man who has done, 3 health tech startups, got them to revenue generation, sold them, international. He's like, it's a fantastic person. And in that, we just made the connection. And now he is been invited to be on the board. So I think the conversations for us, in my experience, just happened naturally and organically, but knowing what I needed was important first, and then kind of finding out the side of my network, just within reach, who had a lot of experience that I didn't have, who can compensate for me.
Awesome. Cynthia, I'd love to hear, when is the right time to bring on advisors, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. With regards to the right time to bring advisors, getting a startup company off the ground is exciting, but also you quickly realize the gaps in skill sets, right? And so I started building out my advisory board very early on with just 2 advisors. And that was for a while. And then as soon as we began our seed round raise about 2 years ago, we then opened up a few more seats for our angel advisory board members, because we wanted, from my experience, we wanted our advisory board members to have skin in the game and also to be instrumental in helping us attract more investors. And so this time around, we expanded the, the disciplines, and we were specifically targeting advisors with expertise in those areas, in those gap areas that we had, such as like health tech, business development. And so I do recommend building your advisory team gradually over time, as the needs of the organizations, will evolve over time. And so building gradually helps you avoid bringing on poorly, fitting advisors. And then it also enables you to avoid all the clutter and noise, imposed by unnecessary advisor interaction. So I would say early on, you could start out with just 1 advisor, and then, add on more advisors as your needs evolve. And so, because as a startup, CEO, founder, time is precious, and you certainly don't want to avoid, unnecessary or too much, management overhead in the formation and maintenance of an advisory, an advisory board team.
I love that. Something I see so many founders who get excited about specific names and experience and have them on the board. They think it's going to help them attract investors, and then they don't end up being able to get anything except for giving away equity because they don't have the time to work them. So that's great. Also, a big shout out on that to listen to the watch out. Cynthia said, make sure we vest any equity we give them, so we can know if we're not getting anything, we're not just giving away the ship. So I love that. Nancy, what are the biggest other mistakes that you see people make on the advisory board side?
I see the biggest mistake that I see is that sometimes an advisory board member will offer to become an angel investor. And then what ends up happening is that a person who's made their fortune previously will then start really controlling what happens with the company. They want to see it go into a particular direction. It's kind of like a notch in their cap, essentially, to be on a particular startup board or anything like that. And so what ends up happening is that it diverts from the company's purpose and what the intention and the direction that the company is going into dealing with that advisory board member who is becoming too overwhelming in a situation, and unfortunately ends up distracting the founders and the management team from doing what they're supposed to do. So we've had a lot of situations where we've had advisory board divorces, essentially, where a person comes in and says, you know what, I've made my own money and I'll be willing to put in $1 million or $2 million. And what ends up happening is the person becomes kind of out of control, says, you know what, your product is not right, I want to control it. Here are the people that I want to put into your development team or your situation, where they don't really think about the direction of the company, but what they do is that they're forcing their own persona and beliefs onto that company and making it almost a catastrophe in that situation. So that's the challenge of bringing on potentially a bad board member at that point.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I love it. I look across companies, and what I see is early on when we're very resource constrained and we need help, being extremely choiceful to what was said here about who you bring on to help you, because you have to manage them, but to get either intros or a specific area of expertise or project done is great. As we grow our companies and our full-time operating staff and our fiduciary board, where we start having other relationships, we start leaning on our advisors as much and probably bring less in unless it's very situational, and instead use those other resources that are either operators or fiduciary. So
Right.
awesome. Before we jump into the everything fiduciary boards, I'd love to go around quickly and see if there's anything additional that you'd like to share on the advisor side. Nicole, jump into you.
Yeah, I think before you think of creating a board or think of an advisor, really know what you need, know what area of expertise you don't necessarily have, or maybe you're not as efficient in or proficient in, and then find a board member that brings that out of you, right? Someone who can kind of see things the way that you don't. That's a real way to add value. But if you don't know what you need, you can get to a point, to Nancy's point, where you have someone on board and you don't really need them. You just had them on board just to have them on board, but you don't have a vision for your own company. You kind of have to have a plan for your advisors before you bring them on, so you know what the expectations should be. So I would say to do that before jumping right in and establishing a board too soon. Take the time to really know your business, know your market, know your target, and know your strengths and your weaknesses, and kind of be real with yourself on what your weaknesses are, which I think sometimes as women, we have a difficult time accepting weaknesses. We're like, no, we can do this, we're awesome, but we're stronger together. So I think that would be a word of advice that I would give. Just slow down, know what you need, and then plan accordingly.
I love so much goodness in that, Nicole, in so many different areas. Thank you. Cynthia, how about you?
Well, forming an advisory board shouldn't just be considered a one and done activity, right? It's not enough to just find and recruit advisors. You have to take the initiative necessary to maximize the value of their contributions to your organization, right? And so, for the most part, my advisory board members, they have very busy schedules with varying levels of availability at different points in time. So it's really up to, the founder or the CEO to ensure that you pull the most, out of them based on what your organization is going through at any given point in time, and so tapping into them for those fresh ideas, their unique perspectives. I reach out to them when I'm stuck, when it comes to making a decision, right? And so they generally won't be there for day to day, but they're more strategic in providing that. So in summary, I recommend, even though it's an advisory board, and I still recommend having some type of structured interaction, regular cadence for your interactions with those advisors, planning ahead, making it easier for them to be aware of what's going on in the organization, and then reaching out to them on an as-needed basis. It's not just that, those ad hoc requests should be on top, of your regular cadence. And so, and then also for how you meet with them, it's just being specific, focus those meetings on just one area or two areas so that you guys are all just paying attention to that area of the company's need versus having a million, asks from them, and just being forthright with these advisory board members. That's, what I would, recommend to do with advisors.
I love it. Such great wisdom in that. Nancy, you're up.
So I would say, think of your company's KPI, like at that particular stage of your company, whether it's a seed or a growth company or even a Fortune 500 company. But think about what are the goals that you need to be able to accomplish at that point in time. And with your advisory board members, have them have some type of ability to see that these are the clear goals that your company needs at this moment, whether it is getting access to investors, getting access to strategic partners, getting access to key customers as well. Those are really, really important aspects. And hopefully if you're picking your advisory board well, that they can be able to deliver with those types of things. Also, they become a sounding board for you. How do you think about certain things? They can give a different perspective. Sometimes they play devil's advocate as well. And so having those ability to bring the best out of your management team, and then hitting those goals, those KPIs, to make sure that you're getting what you need at that point in time, whether it is going into an investment round or just growing revenue in that point in time. Your advisory board should be giving you the best that they have, and you giving them the best that you have as well. But also, they need to serve the purpose for the company too, without distracting from what it needs to have.
I love that. There's so many pearls of wisdom that sound like, yeah, that makes sense. And I just urge everyone in the room to really think about what's been said, because it's things that when you're in it, you don't necessarily feel. You think you're in that situation and you have this opportunity to bring someone on, and it ends up not working. So this is really gold advice to think about. I'll add just a couple easy things. One is there's an agreement put out, I think Founders funded it years ago, called FAST. Great guide for initial advisors in terms of their expertise and your stage of your company, because one of the biggest mistakes I see is founders give away way more equity than they should to advisors. So it's a great stake in the ground to see what really the market is. And then you can ebb and flow based on your expectations and that person's commitment from there, but knowing where you're starting. Also, I talk to a lot of founders who think that their advisors are going to be the ones helping them fundraise. And it rarely works out. Even those intros are not where you end up really going, or that they bring on specific advisors because investors will like that. And investors know that game, and they actually, many good investors see named advisors that you're giving equity to, knowing that you're not getting a lot out of them, as a red flag, not as a benefit. And so follow the advice we were just given on these advisors, because there are some counterintuitive trip ups and things that happen with that. So I love it. Let's move on to governing boards. Nancy, when you think about setting up governing boards, let's start with what are the biggest mistakes that you see people make when they're building and bringing on a board of directors?
Well, I mean, one of the big mistakes that I have, especially for companies that are fundraising, because what happens is that people don't realize that when you're fundraising, a VC comes or an accelerator comes or whatever, what happens is that you are giving up a certain amount of board seats on your governing board. And so that is really important to think about when you are going after investors. And what happens is that they don't really realize that those governing board members are going to also drive the direction of the company, and can also fire you as well. Even though this is their company, they have control. If you give away too much, they have control of what's happening in your organization. So think very carefully about how much equity that you're giving, but also how many board seats that you're giving away when you're putting, you're creating your governing board as well. So that's really important, because when you give away too much control, you're losing control from what's going to happen with your company, especially when those board meetings are happening. So very important to think about.
I love that, Nancy. Cynthia, we're going to take this question round robin, because I always love hearing big mistakes, because I think it's how we learn. What big mistakes do you see founders making when they're pulling together and leading a board?
So with founders, the mistakes that I see is not fully, because you have technical founders who start companies and not really aware of the governance aspect of things. And so not doing your homework before putting a board together. And with each round of investment, you're losing, getting diluted, and also losing a little bit more control of the organization, right? And so that's the main pitfall I see with most founders, just not negotiating, and because they're desperate for those funds, accepting whatever terms that these VCs and other investors, present to them, and not knowing that in the next couple rounds, they may lose control of their organizations.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Nicole. How do you think about mistakes when it comes to putting together a fiduciary board?
Yeah, I think one mistake that I would say is, really know your foundational documents, right? I don't think you should ever walk in the room without at least educating yourself on what those conversations should be, or what it is that you ultimately want as a founder. Giving out equity is important. Knowing the value of your company, I would argue, is even more important, and arguing what the value of your company is, because at some stages, if you don't have a hard valuation, it's all up to what people agree, like, oh, I think you can do that. Yeah, I think you are valued. They pull the comps, and it's all kind of like more art than science. So I would say know your stuff, like know what your foundational documents are. What are your bylaws? What shareholder agreements do you have? How did you structure it? What are your voting rights? How are you sectioning off? Does one vote have more weight than the other? And this way you can kind of go in knowing what you're doing, instead of waiting for VCs or other, fiduciary members who may also be investors to kind of tell you what to do. I think that you having the education and taking the time to know how you structured your company, and then explaining that, and having, I think culture is important. You're building a business, you're building a company, right? So if you are going to steer your own ship, you got to know what your ship is. What kind of vessel is it? Where's it going? How fast can it go? And if you're going to bring someone on your board and they know more than you, that's good. But if they know more than you to the point where you don't even know your foundational documents and what your power is, that's bad, right? Then you get into a position where, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that I could get voted off because you didn't put those stipulations in the documents before. And so I think having a good legal team, and not all lawyers are created equally. And so you really have to make sure that the lawyer that you have is for you. In my experience, not all lawyers are really for you, right? They just go with the script. Oh no, that's not standard. Oh, this is vanilla, what have you. I think that you also being on the same team, like on the same page with your attorneys, to help draft a document in a way that is in your best interest, worst case scenario, best case scenario, having those things ironed out before you start developing your board would be a mistake if you did not have it. Like not taking the time to do that, and to kind of set up your own chessboard is you're going in blind, right? And that's
Awesome.
not good.
Thank you, Nicole. That's great. I love hearing that. We're talking a lot about control because fiduciary boards, there's a lot of other things we need to learn when setting them up. With that said, great boards serve our companies, and they can really help catapult us to the next level if they're really serving the business and serving us. And so would love to get some thoughts on, and I will share, I started my first company. I did not build out my board the way I should have. I did not know better, and it got bigger than I wanted, sooner than I wanted. I didn't balance out the skill set as well, and I did not really look to when and how I was bringing on independent directors that did not have seats via that share class of a round, which really changed things for me. So my second company, I literally had my governing board in place immediately. I got so much value from them that it catapulted us to the next level. So if we look at the control and we look at the provisions, I'd love to know from each of you how you can see a governing board really adding tons of value to the business. Nancy, let's start with you.
I've seen it. We're in situations where an advisory board and governing board too have worked together, and the companies that I've advised as a strategic advisor have actually gotten to the point where they've been acquired, they've had an M&A happen, and it worked out great for everybody. So, I've worked with corporate venture capital as well. So those governing boards, if they have a good sense of what the company is supposed to be about, they know the industry, they know the vertical, they have been instrumental in making those introductions that are really, really important, and also helping to drive the revenue too. So that's really, really important. And I've seen great advisory boards that have been like rock solid, that have really been supportive of the management team and that have been thinking, hey, how can I make this company better? And then also the CEO and the management team are like, we're working really well together. We see this ebb and flow, and we can really see that there's a benefit to it. So I've seen it where M&As have happened, and even up to IPO situations where it's like, this is a really, really good governing board and a rock solid advisory board. And it can be extremely beneficial as well.
Awesome. Cynthia, what do you get from your governing board? What value do you get?
Well, in terms of the value, the board members, right, they are a valuable resource to us. And so that's where the composition of the boards becomes very important. I ensure that, I have people who have diverse backgrounds and experiences so that they can bring their unique perspectives on a whole range of issues that we face as an organization, right? And so our investors, they are well-rounded, right? And they've helped us with strategic partnerships. They've helped us open doors. They've helped us with investments. And it's really, really important in how you interact with the boards and with our board members, right? Because they've been there for me, even in those difficult times, especially with those strategic partnerships and helping with, guidance. Those with industry knowledge have helped us with, open doors and continue to do that for us. And so that's, how they've been, our board members have been very valuable to our organization so far. So it's all about understanding that the governing boards are there to help the company, to help the CEO, to help the executive team. They may disagree with some of your policies, they may disagree with the direction sometimes, but it's all in the best interest of the company. And so I see them as being on the same team as myself, and knowing that they have the company's best interest at heart, and just working closely together with them has helped them be of tremendous value to our organization.
I love that, because I'm with you. It's very rare to see decisions on a company come down to a board vote. Good boards will work issues to really serve the company and to focus most of their time on how do we grow. They can get work done for us. They have their security committees, their audit committees, all the things that can help take work off our plate so we can focus on operating the business and expanding the reach, while they then can also help us, I think, no matter how good we are at seeing the forest and how good we are at seeing the trees, human nature, it's hard to see them both at the same time.
Correct.
If you have people who have a fiduciary responsibility to question whether your trees line up to a certain forest or not, and really push the envelope, can be extremely helpful. So I love hearing that your board, Cynthia, really does support you. Nicole, what is the best value you get from let's take it back to advisory board, from your advisors? Like, how do you think about that and really getting the value from them?
Yeah, my advisory board, they are fantastic. And the way that I view the advisory board is it's a precursor to developing an actual fiduciary board of directors. And the one valuable thing is, like, they remind me of the overall vision, and then they critique the plan, right? The strategy, and just being able to really brainstorm with someone who has industry knowledge, who's kind of been there, done that, and to be teachable in that moment is really valuable. I think that having a board that's for you, that understands where you're going, understands your marketing strategy, understands the plan, understands even how you plan to hire, help you navigate through that system, especially as a startup founder, it's really priceless for me. And so I think that, to Cynthia's point, being able to tap into that resource and understanding like what their value is, you should have the CVs or the resumes of all of your, like, you should know what they've done so you can know how they can also help. And then if you are transparent with them and your plan and what your struggles are, they can help you through it. And I think that for me, they've helped me with positioning, the business strategy, the channels, how to connect to those channels. It's really been really valuable for us, for HX, because, we're in the sports tech market now, but we can also apply to other markets. And so having a board that has that insight on how we can work in those ebbs and flows, it's been extremely valuable for us.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So what I'm hearing from everyone is have very clear expectations, because you need different things from different groups, and you need different things from your groups at different stages of the company and different projects. And so making sure that we match those can really then add value to us. So knowing there's a lot of different things, how do you guys go about compensating and thinking about compensation for a board? And I think, Cynthia, was that you jumping in?
No, but I can
say first.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can talk about compensation. Well, as an early stage, startup company, I really didn't find a whole lot of literature around board compensation. Right, it's just sparse out there, and so I've also seen different varying board compensations as well, and that's going to vary based on the stage of the company. It's going to vary based on the renown of those personalities that you're bringing on the board, right? And then also the resources the company has, right? And so in terms of compensation, we compensate our board members. We've done equity for all of our board members. So we offer equity and options for them to invest at a very at discounted rates in the company. For our board members, for the board of directors, we have to reimburse for out-of-pocket expenses, such as business travel, costs, etc. And then we also indemnify our directors as well from any liabilities that they may incur in their capacity as serving on our company's board. And then we've also taken out of your D&O insurance to also supplement those indemnifications. So that's what we've done in terms of compensation, and that's also subject to change as the company grows and scales, where we will plan to offer more compensation to our board of directors and also to advisory board members.
Awesome. I love that. Nancy, when you bring on an independent director, just piling on what Cynthia was saying, as you grow to that stage, how do you start thinking about compensation?
You start thinking about compensation about like, how much equity is split up into the company? And also, do you intend to have different class shares as well? So those are things that you're thinking about. Also thinking about like, what is the role of that independent director? What are they going to contribute to the organization? And then another thing too is that what are the responsibilities for that person as well? So, thinking about equity. Also, when you're out thinking about things like advisory board too, sometimes people give bonuses or they give referral bonuses as well. So you really have to be clear about like, how much equity do you have that you're going to portion off to give to these people that are helping your company per se, and also be very clear and don't give too much away, to tell you the truth, because many times what happens is that as you go through building these boards, you give too much away, and that then dilutes what you have as you go and raise capital, if you're going to raise capital. And you're going to take a look at it, and your investors are going to be like, you know what, how much equity you're giving away to these board members. That's going to be really important too to think about as well. So think about clear goals, think about how much equity that you're going to give to them, and how to compensate them beyond equity too. Like,
I love that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the thing is, equity is ownership of your company. Think about, can you get referral bonuses? Are you going to give them some type of financial compensation instead of giving equity as well? So think about other ways of compensating your board members too.
I love that. And I realized as I was listening to you that I know we have a wide range of folks on this Zoom. So just for clarity, when we talk about these different board seats, there are really 3 types of board seats. There are operator board seats, right? Those are the management team. Like if you found your company, you usually give yourself 1 or 2 board seats. You might have a co-founder who has a board seat. Then you have investor board seats. They can be handled differently, but a mistake I see folks make if they have certain investors who ask for additional compensation for being on the board. When you are a younger company, they're getting the board seat to help guide the company and steward their investment. They do not get extra comp. From there, then you can bring on independent directors, which the definition of independent is they're not on the operating team, they're not on the management team, and they're not an investor in the company. And so investors look after their share class usually of investment, and they represent that. And an independent director is supposed to be more non-partial, but be careful because sometimes the investors ask for the right to appoint that seat. And so then you start getting in the area of gray of, is it really independent? So wanted to just provide that clarity of terms. I want to leave time for questions. So I'd love to make sure we have very actionable, clear takeaways. So I'd love to go around and ask each one of you for one of your biggest takeaways for this group on either fiduciary governing or anything else when we talk about building these boards. And Nicole, let's start with you.
Yeah, I really like what Nancy said about, you know, figuring out who's who. I would recommend for people to get, which I would find value, which I found valuable for us.
Could you repeat what you were saying when you'd find valuable?
Sure. What I would say, a takeaway that I want people to get from this is really know, like, connect with your people. When I say your people, connect with your legal and your accounting team. That's what I did to kind of divvy out your shares and then kind of put it in a waterfall so you see how it affects you before you start kind of giving out equity and figuring out how many board seats you can afford to have right now. So really, I would say, take your time and do the research and get to know this person before you bring them on board, right? Like, kind of date them for, I would say, at least 6 months, really. I mean, because you don't really know a person until after 90 days anyway. And also the level of commitment. Most board members are very high profile people. They have a lot going on. And so what time do they actually have to invest? You know, there was one person that I really wanted to be on the board, but she just didn't have the time. And we both agreed. She was like, I want to do this, I want to do that, but she just didn't have the time. And so I didn't realize that until months later. And so I would say, take your time, figure out your shares first and what your rules are first, and then go out there and meet a couple people and, build a great business and then sell it.
I love that. Go kick some ass. That's the
That's
takeaway.
right.
I love it, Nicole. Best takeaway that we could have. I love it. Cynthia, how about you?
Yes, the takeaway I would say is to do your homework. It's extremely important as founders, CEOs, that you do your homework, right? You have to diligence each prospect methodically, just as you would, do when you're hiring any other, management team member, right? Or extend the same discipline to your board selection process, because that's really important. This journey is, is many things. It's tumultuous, it's psychological, emotionally, economically trying, right? And so you go from one extreme to the other. And so it's really, really important, that you, and I know there's so many moving parts going on all at the same time, but it's also important that you take the time to do your homework and do your due diligence before bringing anyone on your advisory board, because that will cost you down the line. So just do your homework.
Totally. I love it. Like, be prepared. I just have to say, Cynthia, it shocks me how many people just want to ride coattails of people building. And it is, and if it's too good to be true, it is. And there's names that come out of the woodwork trying to get something. And it's really sad because there's all of these people who add so much amazing value. So I love what you're saying about make sure you do the homework, because if not, there's a lot of folks who I don't even know if they're bad folks. They just really believe they have value and they don't. So I love do your homework. Nancy, how about you?
I would say be okay with different kinds of personalities, because sometimes you don't have to be best buddies with the people on your advisory board. You need to be respectful, but you also have to be open that they may call you on your crap. Basically, that they can say, hey, what are you doing? Is the right direction that you're happening in, but not in a combative type of way. Thinking about what is the best for the business and how you have the clear goal of making the business succeed as well. Another thing too is that with the governing board, think about the intentions of each board member on that governing board as well, and including your independent director too, because sometimes, and this I've seen this happen, where an investor will be colluding with an independent director. It can turn into a soap opera like crazy. And you don't want that to happen. So be very clear about what the objective is, what the intention is as well, because those are the people that are driving the business. And those are the people that are ones that can either make the business succeed or fail. That's really, really important. And you have to think about the end goal, which is going to benefit all of you at that point in time.
I love that. I'd add for my takeaway, we've talked a lot about like different scenarios, and I think it's really important for us to acknowledge, as builders, there are times when we can control our situation, and there's times where we make trade-offs in our choices. And because we are choosing something else, and we all want to be in a part where we get to pick every board member that we have, pick which investors we come in. And there are times that we can do that. And there are times where it's a choice between doing that or not keeping the jobs for our teams that we've built up. And so really understanding those trade-offs and choices that you're making, and don't, like, our job is to put us in much of the driver's seat to get the right things for us that we can, and to take trade-offs where it's the right thing and we believe it is, and to walk away when we don't feel the trade-off is worth it. And so know that we are sitting here giving advice on how to go about doing that. You have complete control on advisors. When you start taking money, sometimes you're like taking money from a fund, then your choice is, I really want that fund because their brand name is going to help me hire these really important people, but you don't have control of which person they're going to put on the board. There might be a time when so there's a lot of nuance to that. So just be aware of the trade-offs that you're making in the choice. Don't necessarily think about your valuation as your biggest thing. Think about all of your terms, who you get on your board, your control provisions, and that. So you get to be as much in the driver's seat as possible for that instance in time.
Yeah,
So,
and one more thing that I add too is that when you're going after funding and you are going to different types of funds, think about what the end goal is for that money, because sometimes funds are just giving you that funds, that's it. But then there are also funds that are giving you strategic partnerships and referrals to customers and things like that. And then what can also happen is that they become a better partner, and then it also ultimately ends up helping your company in the first place.
totally. I love that. And I didn't leave as much time for questions as I would like, but I see the couple that are on here. So someone wanted non-dilutive equity, and what are our thoughts? That in itself, I think that there's some homework to be done on what that means, because your ownership and your equity is a pie. And so anything that you give away is going to dilute part of that pie. So I think it might be that maybe they wanted something that was already put aside in an option pool, or maybe they're asking for equity to come out of the founder share versus the investor share, or vice versa. So they might be asking questions. I'd be really careful that that person either doesn't know what they're asking for, or is leading you down a path, because that pie doesn't change. You can issue more shares at any time if you get board approval and you have the votes to do that, but that in itself will dilute everyone equally. So once you have that pie is the pie, and any equity that's given will dilute either everyone or a portion.
Another thing about non-dilutive equity, I would be incredibly concerned about someone asking that, or what are they really going to serve? What purpose do they serve to get that non-dilutive equity?
Totally. And I was going to jump in and say, if that was a confusion and it's non-dilutive funding, like grants or other things that get you money for your company, the trade-off there is usually your time that it takes to manage the criteria for that funding. And that's a much easier choice to make. So with that, I see a longer question. I want to make sure we get to. Should there be
Can I just say, I would not give non-diluted equity as a feedback. I don't think it's a good, because you're going to be diluted, to Susan's point, and everyone should be diluted. I didn't know if that was clear or not. It's just, it wouldn't be good for you for that type of
There
agreement.
is no such thing. Let's just say it, that there is no
Right.
such thing in existence. Yeah. Awesome. Should there be timelines associated with the board members' access to your board beyond repayment of equity for all three categories? So should there be a timeline for board seats, for operator seats, investor seats, and independent directors? Cynthia, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, we do have timelines for all of our, board seats. Anywhere from 2 to 3 years is what we have. And those timelines are in place for what we do have at PharmD Live.
Awesome. What do you see, Nancy? Do you see different timelines for different boards?
Yeah, I see different timelines definitely for different boards, and it's also different depending upon the stage of the company. So advisory boards, I usually say have a shorter amount of time because you don't know what's going to end up happening. With the governing board, sometimes you can't control how much time that a person can have a board seat, because partially it's determined up to you, but it's also partially determined up to the investors as well, because they will then determine like, hey, we want this board member for X amount of months or years or things like that. So that can be negotiated. But advisory board, I would say do on a year-to-year basis. And the reason why is that it gives enough time to see what their personality is, but also give a stipulation that you can, just not have an advisor. Yeah, because otherwise, if they cause chaos, then it's going to be a problem. But part of you can control with the advisory board. The other part is negotiable at that point.
Awesome. I wanted to cheat everything you guys said, but it looks like we are officially at the end of our time. Thank you, ladies, for just such amazing wisdom that you're imparting. Super appreciate it. And you guys, if you have not gone and checked out the 4th floor or got on the waiting list, I can personally vouch for the amount of amazing content I've gotten. And I don't know, Kat, Brain, if you guys want to sign us off.
Not really, just a giant thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, all of you panelists. This was incredible.